The maid cried outside the Mafia Boss's office. One phone call made him lose control. What could make a single phone call change everything? And why would that moment matter so much? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional, cinematic stories filled with suspense, unforgettable characters, and unexpected twists, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for your continued support. It truly means a lot and helps this channel keep bringing you powerful stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what do you think could make someone as powerful as a mafia boss lose control? Now, settle in, and let's step into the beginning of this unforgettable story. People rarely remember the moment their lives changed until they realize they can never go back. The marble hallway outside the executive offices always smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, a strange comfort in a building where everyone seemed too important to notice the people quietly keeping it spotless. My name is Emily Carter, and at 24, I had learned that the easiest way to survive was to become invisible. Invisible people cleaned fingerprints from glass walls before sunrise, emptied trash cans filled with expensive lunches, and slipped away before anyone bothered to ask their names. That Monday morning began like every other. My cleaning cart rolled silently across the thick carpet as sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, painting long golden lines across the hallway. Executives hurried past in tailored suits with wireless earbuds and schedules worth more than my annual paycheck. None of them looked at me, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Being unnoticed meant being safe. I reached the hallway leading to the private office reserved for Damian Moretti, the company's mysterious CEO. People spoke his name in careful voices. Some admired him. Others feared him. I knew almost nothing about the man except that he rarely smiled, always arrived before everyone else, and somehow noticed details no one else did. I had only seen him twice from a distance, and both times he walked with the calm confidence of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. I parked my cart beside the wall and reached into my apron for the microfiber cloth. My phone vibrated. I smiled automatically, expecting another message from my younger brother Ethan asking if I remembered to bring his favorite soup after work. Instead, the screen displayed the hospital's number. The smile disappeared before I answered. Hello. My voice barely sounded like mine. The woman on the other end spoke gently, but every word seemed heavier than the last. She explained that Ethan's surgery could not move forward until an unexpected insurance issue was resolved. They had already submitted everything required, but the approval had suddenly been placed on hold. Without authorization, there was nothing they could do today. I stared through the enormous glass windows, but the skyline blurred into soft gray shapes. There has to be a mistake, I whispered. Please check again. She promised they were trying. She apologized more than once. None of her apologies changed the answer. When the call ended, I lowered the phone slowly, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breathing became uneven. I pressed one hand against my mouth, desperate to keep the sobs from echoing through the hallway. I couldn't lose this opportunity for Ethan. He had waited months for this procedure, counting the days with the kind of hope only younger brothers still believed in. I leaned against the wall outside Damian Moretti's office, trying to pull myself together before anyone saw me. But behind the heavy wooden door, footsteps stopped. The handle turned quietly, and without realizing it, I had already been heard. The office door opened without a sound. I wiped my cheeks so quickly that my skin burned, lowered my eyes, and reached for the handle of my cleaning cart as though I had somewhere urgent to be. Mississippi. His voice was calm, deep, impossible to ignore. I stopped anyway. I am sorry, I said before he could ask anything. I will be out of the hallway in just a second. My words came out thin and unsteady. I hated that. I hated sounding fragile in front of anyone, especially someone whose shoes probably cost more than my monthly rent. For several long seconds, he said nothing. I finally looked up. Damian Moretti stood in the doorway of his office wearing a charcoal suit with his sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, as if he had been working since dawn. Sunlight framed him from the windows behind me, but it was his expression that caught me off guard. He was not annoyed. He was studying me with quiet attention, the kind that made pretending impossible. Did someone hurt you? He asked. I shook my head immediately. No, sir. It was not exactly a lie. Nobody had hurt me that morning. Life simply had. Then why are you crying? The question was simple. The answer was not. I forced a smile that fooled neither of us. It is just a family matter. I will take care of it. He glanced toward the phone still trembling in my hand. You were speaking with a hospital. My heart skipped. I had forgotten he could have heard more than my voice through the partially open door. My younger brother, I admitted quietly. He has been waiting months for surgery. Saying the words aloud somehow made them heavier. They said there is an insurance problem. They cannot move forward today. My throat tightened again, and I looked down before the tears returned. I am sorry. I should not be talking about this at work. I expected him to nod politely and walk away. That was what executives did. They had meetings to attend and numbers to chase. They did not carry strangers' burdens. Instead, he asked, "What is your brother's name?" I blinked in surprise. Ethan. How old is he? 15. He gave one slow nod, almost as if committing the answer to memory. Go finish your shift. I frowned, confused by how ordinary his response sounded. Sir, your shift, he repeated calmly. Do not lose the rest of your day because of a phone call. There was something reassuring about the certainty in his voice, but certainty did not change hospital policies or insurance approvals. Thank you, I whispered anyway. He stepped back into his office without another word. The heavy door closed softly. I stood there for another moment before pushing my cart toward the elevators. My hand still shook, but now it was from confusion instead of panic. Inside his office, Damien remained perfectly still beside the window. Then he pressed a single button on the phone sitting on his desk. Olivia, he said to his executive assistant the instant she answered. I need every document connected to an insurance claim involving Emily Carter's brother. I want to know why the approval stopped this morning. There was a brief silence before she replied. I will start immediately. Damien looked through the glass wall toward the empty hallway where I had disappeared. His voice remained controlled, almost gentle. No, you will not start. You will finish. And I want the truth before noon. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of polished floors, empty conference rooms, and smiles that never quite reached my face. I told myself to focus on work because worrying had never solved a single problem. Every few minutes my eyes drifted toward my phone, hoping the hospital would call back with better news. It never rang. Around 11:30, I was replacing fresh flowers in the executive lobby when two senior managers walked past without noticing me. I have never seen Mr. Moretti cancel his investor meeting before, one of them whispered. Whatever he is dealing with must be serious. The others simply nodded, and they disappeared into the elevator. I frowned. Damien Moretti had struck me as the kind of man whose schedule never changed for anyone. I pushed the thought away and continued working. Whatever occupied the chief executive of a billion-dollar company had nothing to do with a maid like me. At least that was what I believed. 3 floors above me, Damien sat alone in the conference room that overlooked the city. The untouched cup of espresso beside him had gone cold while Olivia placed a thin folder on the polished table. Everything you requested, she said quietly. He opened it without speaking. The first page contained Ethan Carter's insurance records. Every required form had been submitted weeks earlier. Every medical evaluation had been approved. Every signature was complete. There was only one unexplained change. At 8:14 that morning, the authorization had been manually suspended. Damien's eyes narrowed. Who has the authority to do that? Olivia slid another page across the table. Only one outside review contractor had access to the file. He read the company name once, then again. His expression did not change, but Olivia had worked beside him long enough to recognize the silence that meant he had noticed something important. There is another detail, she continued carefully. This contractor is partially owned by one of the investment groups connected to our corporate health division. Damien leaned back slowly. One of ours. Indirectly. Olivia hesitated. The ownership is hidden through several subsidiaries, but yes. He closed the folder. Someone delayed a child's surgery while protecting a business arrangement. It was not a question. Olivia lowered her eyes. That appears to be the case. For several seconds the room remained perfectly still. Outside, helicopters crossed the Manhattan skyline, while traffic crawled beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, Damien quietly reached for his phone. Schedule a meeting with every executive responsible for our healthcare partnerships. Olivia looked surprised. Today, within the hour. Some of them are traveling. Then they can travel back. His voice never rose, yet every word landed with unmistakable weight. Olivia immediately began making calls. Meanwhile, I stood in the employee break room stirring powdered creamer into coffee that had long since lost its warmth. I checked my bank account one more time, even though I already knew the balance by heart. It was nowhere near enough to solve anything. I closed the application before the numbers could make me cry again. My phone finally buzzed. My heart raced as I answered. "Miss Carter," the hospital coordinator said gently. "We are still waiting for authorization. We have not given up, but we wanted to keep you informed." I thanked her, forcing my voice to stay steady. After the call ended, I whispered to myself, "Please do not make Ethan wait any longer." At that exact moment, several floors above, Damian Moretti looked around the boardroom as the last executive took a seat, and before anyone could begin their presentation, he quietly placed Ethan's file in the center of the table. No one spoke after Damian placed the medical file on the conference table. 6 executives exchanged uncertain glances, each trying to understand why a routine quarterly meeting had begun with the records of a 15-year-old boy none of them recognized. Damian remained standing at the head of the table, his hands resting lightly on the back of his chair. His expression revealed nothing, which somehow made the silence even heavier. "Does anyone know why this surgery was delayed?" he asked. His voice was measured, almost conversational. No one answered. Finally, the head of corporate partnerships cleared his throat. "I'm not familiar with that specific case." Damian nodded once. "Neither was I an hour ago." Olivia distributed copies of the report to everyone in the room. Papers turned quietly as the executives read page after page. Every approval had been completed. Every requirement had been satisfied. Then they reached the final page showing the manual suspension entered just after 8 o'clock that morning. This authorization was stopped without medical justification. Damian continued. "Explain it." A vice president adjusted his glasses nervously. "The outside review contractor manages those decisions independently." "Does it?" Damian asked. Olivia tapped a key on the large screen behind him. A detailed ownership chart appeared, connecting one company after another until it reached the investment group tied directly to their own healthcare division. The room became noticeably quieter. The vice president stared at the screen, his confidence fading. "I did not realize the relationship was structured that way." "That is the problem," Damian replied. "You should have." Across town, I finished polishing the last conference table before lunch and quietly gathered my supplies. Every task felt automatic, but my thoughts never left Ethan. He hated hospitals. Even when he tried to smile, I could always tell he was scared. I remembered promising him that everything would be fine, even though I had not believed my own words. I wondered whether he was staring at the ceiling of his hospital room, asking nurses the same question over and over. "When can we begin?" I wished I had an answer for him. Back inside the boardroom, Damian slowly closed the folder. "A child has been waiting for months. Today someone decided to make him wait longer because a spreadsheet looked more convenient than a human life." No one interrupted him. "If this happened once, it has happened before." Olivia quietly placed another report beside him. "We reviewed additional files during the last hour," she said. "There are several similar delays under the same contractor." One executive leaned forward in disbelief. "You are saying this has become a pattern?" Olivia answered honestly. "That is exactly what the records suggest." Damian looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes. "By the end of today, I want every contract with that contractor frozen, pending review. I also want every affected family contacted personally. If we are connected to this failure, we will correct it." The executives immediately began taking notes. Nobody questioned the order. Nobody argued about the financial consequences. Meanwhile, I stepped outside onto the employee terrace for a few minutes of fresh air. Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon sun, beautiful and indifferent at the same time. I closed my eyes and whispered one quiet prayer for Ethan. At that exact moment, Olivia's phone rang. She listened for only a few seconds before looking toward Damian. "The hospital has just confirmed something," she said softly. "They are ready to reopen the case as soon as the authorization is restored." Damian gave one calm nod. "Then let us make sure they do not wait another minute." By late afternoon, I had almost convinced myself to stop hoping. Hope could be dangerous when bills kept arriving and miracles rarely did. I finished organizing supplies in the employee storage room before checking my phone one more time. No missed calls. No new messages. Just the same quiet screen reflecting the tired expression I barely recognized anymore. I slipped the phone back into my apron and reminded myself that there was still work to finish. If I kept moving, maybe my thoughts would not catch up with me. Upstairs, Damien stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office while Olivia ended another phone call. The contractor has restored the authorization, she reported. The hospital has already received confirmation. Damien remained silent for a moment, watching the afternoon traffic flow beneath the skyline. Good. Olivia hesitated before adding. The hospital still believes the correction came from the insurance company. Damien gave a slight nod. Let it stay that way. She understood immediately. He was not interested in gratitude. He wanted the problem solved, nothing more. Before leaving, Olivia paused at the door. There is one more thing. Miss Carter still has no idea any of this happened because of this morning. Damien looked toward the hallway outside his office, where custodians quietly continued their routines. She does not need to know. Olivia smiled faintly. You notice people more than they realize. He answered without looking away from the window. Everyone deserves to be noticed. Downstairs, my supervisor handed me a list of additional evening assignments. Normally, I would have sighed at the extra work, but overtime meant a few more dollars, and every dollar mattered. I thanked her, pushed my cart toward another hallway, and tried not to think about Ethan lying in a hospital bed wondering why nothing was happening. Then my phone vibrated again. My heart immediately raced. I answered before the first ring had completely ended. Miss Carter. It was the same hospital coordinator, but this time her voice sounded different. Brighter. I wanted to let you know that the insurance authorization has just been approved. We are preparing your brother for surgery tomorrow morning. I closed my eyes so tightly that tears slipped down my cheeks before I realized I was crying again. Approved? I whispered. Are you sure? Yes. Everything has already been confirmed. There will be no additional delay. I leaned against the wall because my knees suddenly felt too weak to hold me. For the first time all day, I could breathe without feeling a weight pressing against my chest. Thank you, I repeated over and over, although I knew the woman on the phone had not been the one who made it happen. After the call ended, I laughed softly through my tears, earning a curious smile from another custodian walking past. Good news? She asked kindly. I nodded. The best news. Hundreds of feet above me, Damien's office phone rang once more. Olivia stepped inside carrying another folder. The board has approved every recommendation without objection, she said. The partnership review begins tonight. Damien accepted the folder but did not open it. And Ethan Carter? His procedure is officially back on schedule. A quiet sense of relief crossed Damien's face so briefly that anyone else might have missed it. He looked toward the setting sun, painting Manhattan in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the building below, Emily Carter was smiling again, completely unaware that a single conversation outside his office had quietly changed far more lives than either of them could yet imagine. The next morning began before sunrise. I arrived at the hospital carrying the homemade chicken soup Ethan always asked for after difficult appointments, even though I knew he would not be allowed to eat before surgery. Some habits were stronger than logic. When I stepped into his room, he looked up with a nervous smile that tried very hard to be brave. You made it, he said. I promised I would. I answered, pulling a chair beside his bed. We talked about everything except the operation. His favorite baseball team. The old apartment we both wanted to leave someday. The tiny diner near our neighborhood where the pancakes were somehow always perfect. Every ordinary conversation felt precious because it kept fear waiting outside the room a little longer. A nurse entered carrying a clipboard, her expression noticeably lighter than it had been the day before. Everything is ready, she said warmly. Your insurance authorization came through faster than expected. The surgical team has already been notified. Ethan looked at me with relief shining in his eyes. See? I told you everything would work out. I forced a smile, grateful that he believed it. After the nurses wheeled him toward the operating floor, I remained in the waiting area staring at the closed elevator doors until they disappeared from sight. My phone buzzed. It was my supervisor asking whether I would still be able to report for my afternoon shift. I wiped my eyes and replied that I would be there as soon as visiting hours ended. Bills did not stop simply because life became overwhelming. Across the city, Damien Moretti walked into another executive meeting. This one felt different. The atmosphere was heavier. Olivia placed a thick investigation report in front of every department head. The internal review is complete, she announced. Damien remained seated while everyone silently read the first pages. The findings revealed that several families had experienced unnecessary delays because a small group of senior administrators had rewarded outside contractors for reducing short-term medical expenses. None of the delays had been based on patient care. They had been driven entirely by financial targets. A long silence settled across the room. Finally, one executive spoke quietly. "How did nobody notice this?" Damien answered without hesitation. "People noticed. They simply convinced themselves it was someone else's responsibility." His words lingered in the room long after he finished speaking. Another executive lowered his head. "What happens now?" Damien folded his hands calmly. "Every agreement connected to this practice ends today. Every employee involved will face a formal ethics review. Every affected family will receive immediate assistance." Nobody argued. Nobody searched for excuses. They understood this decision had already been made. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the hospital chapel. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, filling the quiet room with soft colors. I was not sure whether I was praying or simply trying to breathe. I thanked God for giving Ethan another chance and silently hoped whoever had somehow fixed the impossible situation would someday receive the same kindness they had shown us. Hours later, a surgeon finally entered the waiting area with a gentle smile. "The procedure went very well," he said. My knees nearly gave out from relief. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they carried hope instead of fear. At almost that exact moment, Olivia quietly stepped into Damien's office holding one final report. "There is something you should know," she said. "Miss Carter never stopped thanking the hospital staff. She still believes a stranger simply decided to do the right thing." Damien looked out across the Manhattan skyline before answering softly, sometimes believing that is exactly what keeps hope alive. 3 days later, life began to settle into something that almost felt normal again. Ethan was recovering faster than the doctors had expected, filling every hospital visit with jokes about the terrible food and asking when he could finally go home. Watching him smile without forcing it made every exhausted shift worthwhile. I returned to work carrying a lighter heart than I had in months, greeting familiar coworkers with genuine smiles instead of polite ones. For the first time in a long while, the future did not seem impossible. Yet something inside the building had quietly changed. People moved through the executive floor with unusual seriousness. Meetings lasted longer. Conversations stopped whenever someone unfamiliar walked by. Even those of us responsible for cleaning could sense that important decisions were unfolding behind closed doors. Nobody explained anything, but everyone felt it. That afternoon, while replacing fresh towels in the executive lounge, I overheard 2 department directors speaking in low voices near the coffee machine. "The entire healthcare partnership division is being reorganized," one of them said. "Several contracts have already been terminated." The other shook his head in disbelief. All because someone finally reviewed the insurance files. They noticed me entering and immediately changed the subject. I quietly continued folding towels, pretending I had heard nothing. It was not my place to ask questions. Upstairs, Damien reviewed another stack of reports while Olivia stood beside his desk. "Every affected family has now been contacted," she said. "Emergency approvals have been completed, and the independent ethics committee has begun its work." Damien slowly closed the final folder. "Good." Olivia smiled faintly. "There is something unusual about the responses." He looked up. Most families did not ask who corrected the situation. They simply thanked whoever cared enough to notice. Damien remained silent for several moments before answering. "That is all the recognition anyone should need." Olivia studied him carefully. During the years she had worked beside him, she had watched him negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions without showing emotion. Yet one frightened young woman crying outside his office had quietly redirected an entire corporate division. She never mentioned the thought aloud. Later that evening, I finished disinfecting the executive conference room after another long meeting. As I gathered my supplies, I noticed a leather notebook left behind on the polished table. Company policy required every forgotten item to be returned immediately, so I carried it toward the reception desk outside Damien's office. Before I could knock, the door opened. Damien looked surprised to see me standing there. "I think someone left this," I said, holding out the notebook with both hands. He accepted it with a small nod. "Thank you, Emily." I blinked. I had never told him my first name after that morning. "You remembered?" The question escaped before I could stop it. A quiet smile touched the corner of his mouth, subtle enough that most people might have missed it. Names matter. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable instead of awkward. "How is your brother?" he asked. My face immediately brightened. "He is doing much better. The surgery went perfectly." Relief flickered across Damien's eyes, so briefly it almost disappeared before I could recognize it. "I am glad to hear that." I smiled warmly. "Someone gave us a miracle this week. I still do not know who, but I hope they know they changed 2 lives forever." Damien lowered his eyes for just a second before meeting mine again. "Sometimes the best things people do are the ones they never take credit for." His words stayed with me long after I walked away. While behind the quietly closing office door, Damien stood alone wondering how much longer the truth could remain hidden. The following Saturday, my shift ended earlier than usual. Instead of rushing home to collapse into bed, I stopped by the neighborhood bakery Ethan loved. His doctor had finally allowed him to enjoy something other than hospital food, and after everything we had been through, a box of cinnamon rolls felt like a celebration. As I walked back toward the subway, my phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. They were inviting former patients and their families to a small appreciation gathering the following week, thanking everyone who had helped support their community health program. I smiled, thinking it would be nice for Ethan to meet some of the nurses outside the hospital. I never imagined that simple invitation would answer the question that had followed me every day since his surgery. A week later, the hospital lobby looked completely different from the anxious place I remembered. Children laughed near a table covered with balloons. Volunteers handed out cookies and coffee. Doctors spoke with families instead of rushing through hallways. Ethan walked beside me without assistance, moving slowly but confidently, and every step reminded me how close we had come to losing this chance. While he wandered toward a table displaying recovery stories, I remained near the reception desk reading a framed plaque thanking several organizations for expanding patient assistance programs. One name immediately caught my attention: Moretti Foundation. My heart skipped. I had seen that name every morning outside the executive office where I worked. Before I could think further, I overheard 2 nurses speaking nearby. The foundation increased its emergency funding after that insurance investigation, one of them said quietly. Mr. Moretti insisted families should never have to wait because of paperwork again. The other nodded with admiration. He visited after everything was resolved, but he did not want anyone announcing it. He said the patients mattered more than the publicity. I stood perfectly still. The hallway around me seemed to fade into silence. Moretti. Damien Moretti. Memories rushed back all at once. The morning outside. His office. The calm questions. The unexpected kindness. The way he somehow remembered Ethan's name. The relief in his eyes when I told him the surgery had gone well. None of it had been coincidence. I felt tears gathering again. But these were different from the ones he had first seen. They carried gratitude instead of fear. Ethan returned holding a small paper bag filled with cookies. "What is wrong?" he asked softly. I smiled through watery eyes. "Nothing is wrong." I looked toward the hospital entrance where sunlight poured through the glass doors. "I finally know who gave us our miracle." Ethan followed my gaze even though there was no one standing there anymore. A volunteer approached with a brochure describing the foundation's new patient assistance initiative. Across the front was a simple photograph of Damien standing beside hospital staff during a quiet dedication ceremony. No grand speech. No dramatic headline. Just one sentence beneath the picture. Committed to making sure every family receives the care they deserve. I gently traced the edge of the brochure with my fingertips. For the first time since that impossible week, I understood why he had never claimed credit. He had never helped us, so I would thank him. He had helped because, somewhere beneath the reputation that made powerful people lower their voices, he believed that compassion carried more weight than recognition. And in that moment, I realized I could never walk past his office again without seeing the man behind the title. Monday morning arrived with clear skies stretching above Manhattan, and for the first time in years, I walked into the building without carrying fear on my shoulders. My cleaning cart rolled across the familiar marble floors, but everything felt different because I was different. Gratitude had a quiet way of changing the weight of ordinary days. I reached the executive hallway just as Damien stepped out of his office, preparing for another full schedule of meetings. Our eyes met, and before I could lose my courage, I walked toward him. "Good morning, Mr. Moretti." He stopped, and offered the same calm nod I had come to recognize. "Good morning, Emily." My hands tightened around the small paper bag I had been carrying since dawn. "I brought something for you." He looked genuinely surprised as I held it out. "My brother insisted," I explained with a nervous smile. "They are cinnamon rolls from the bakery near our apartment. He said heroes deserve breakfast too." Damien accepted the bag slowly, almost as if it weighed far more than a few pastries. "Your brother called me a hero?" I nodded. "He does not know your name. He only knows someone refused to let him lose his chance." For several quiet seconds, neither of us spoke. The busy hallway around us faded beneath the gentle rhythm of another ordinary workday beginning. Finally, Damien looked at me with the same steady expression he had worn the morning he first found me outside his office. "How is Ethan?" "He is back in school," I answered proudly. "He even joined baseball practice again last week." A warmth appeared in Damien's eyes that words could never fully describe. "That is good news." I took a slow breath before asking the question I had carried in my heart ever since the hospital event. "Why did you help us?" He looked through the nearby windows where morning sunlight reflected across the city skyline. "Because I happened to walk through a hallway at the right moment." I shook my head gently. "Most people would have kept walking." His answer came quietly, almost like a thought meant only for himself. "Power means very little if it cannot make someone's hardest day a little easier." I felt tears gathering again, but I smiled instead of looking away. "Thank you," I whispered. "Not only for Ethan. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." Damien gave a small smile before turning toward the conference room where another day of decisions waited. "Take care of your brother." "I will." As he walked away, I realized something extraordinary had happened without either of us noticing. He had never treated me like someone invisible again, and because of that, I no longer felt invisible anywhere. Months later, Ethan fully recovered. The healthcare reforms continued helping families we would never meet, and life slowly found its peaceful rhythm again. Sometimes I still passed the office where everything had begun. Every time I did, I remembered that one impossible morning when I believed the world had stopped caring. I had been wrong. Sometimes hope does not arrive with applause or headlines. Sometimes it opens a quiet office door, asks a simple question, and changes countless lives without ever asking for recognition. And that is how I learned the strongest people are not remembered because others fear them. They are remembered because someone, somewhere, never had to cry alone again.